morning, everybody, and a special welcome to our guest this morning from the Future Lake Champlain Committee, Advisory Committee. And our committee is all present, but one member who will be coming along shortly, our Vice Chairman, Chris Pearson. And would the other committee members want to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Anthony Polina, Washington County Senate.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland County District.
Corey Parent, Franklin County and Alberg.
And I'm Bobby Starr, represent Orleans and Essex County. So it's Tuesday, February 15th, and we'll get started. So give you folks as much time as you need to get through your presentation, and like to welcome Jeff Weinberg from Rutland. Good morning, Jeff, and I guess you're going to lead off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer apologies from our actual chair, Mark Nod, who I explained earlier, but now that we're on the record, he will be joining us later. He's on the road and delayed in joining. So I'll start, do his part at the beginning, and hopefully he'll be able to do his part at the end. Yep. The other folks that we have here from our committee are Hillary Solomon and Bob Fisher, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, Hillary Solomon from the Poultney Meadowy Natural Resources Conservation District, which is located in Poultney, Vermont, and then I live in Middletown Springs, Vermont.
Hi, I'm Bob Fisher. I'm the Water Quality Superintendent for the City of South Burlington, and I live in Barrie.
Good morning and welcome, folks.
Yeah. So we have, I understand, provided the committee with copies of our one sheet, two-sided Lake Champlain action plan for 2022, and that's what we're going to be speaking to and hopefully answering all of your questions on it. The Citizens Advisory Committee on the Future of Lake Champlain was created by statute here in Vermont many years ago. I don't have the date in front of me, but long before I became a member of the committee. And essentially we're charged with one technical, one actual deliverable, and a general obligation to investigate the situation, the condition of Lake Champlain, and to make recommendations through the action plan on an annual basis to the governor and to the legislature regarding challenges that the lake is facing and recommendations for future action. The committee is made up of 10 citizens widely representing geographical and there it is, widely representing geographic areas in Vermont, in the Lake Champlain Basin, and also with various expertise and backgrounds. In addition to that, there are 2 senators and 2 representatives that serve on the committee. So, and we meet about 8 times a year. Most of the meetings are devoted to briefings that educate us on what's going on and become the information that largely ends up in our consensus recommendation, which is what this action plan represents. We also take time in every meeting, and sometimes schedule special meetings. Prior to the pandemic, we moved around the state a bit to have public hearings and hear from members of the broader public and larger communities what their concerns and expectations are as well. So that's essentially what we do. And I don't think any further introductions really needed because we really want to get into the recommendations. Hillary, we can go with the list of the witnesses. We'll be bouncing around a bit in the action plan, but Hillary, why don't you go first? And I believe you're going to take up aquatic invasives.
Did you want me to aquatic invasives first, did you say?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, so the first thing we'll talk about then this morning is the aquatic invasives issue in Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain has 51 reported aquatic invasive species. 2 of those are relatively new, the spiny water flea and the fishhook water flea. There has been a significant decrease in the staffing at Vermont DEC to help address this issue. They run a funding program that helps to subsidize efforts of lake associations and nonprofits to combat invasive species. The funding is both on decline, but possibly even more challenging, the staffing levels at DEC have been declining recently. So in 2017, there were 3 full-time employees who helped to oversee the aquatic invasives program and the distribution of these grants and aid that they give out each year. Now they only have 1 full-time person. She's fantastic, actually, but she is, unable to keep up with the workload. So, for example, the grants that were issued last year haven't, the second half of them, 60% of them haven't been paid out yet to the folks who've expended funding last summer in their aquatic invasive species efforts. And it sounds like from DEC that the funds for that program are projected to decline in the future. So that's a big concern right now. Only 25% of the need of these projects, of the requests, are being met. This is a huge opportunity to leverage other funding. The lake associations and nonprofits bring in a lot of funding, up to $1 million of leveraged funds and volunteer hours. It's a big piece. It's got a big community engagement piece. It has a little bit of a workforce development piece because you get some education happening with volunteers. You have some summer staff, some part-time staff, some AmeriCorps type staff who work on these projects, who oversee volunteers or who facilitate some of these programs. We have the greeters programs, have high school students working at the boat launches to help to help identify if there are invasive species on boats coming in and out. And one big need that I really see in my area, there are no boat wash stations in the Vermont part of the Lake Champlain watershed, the South Lake section where I work. And they're just seen as being too expensive. They're difficult to install. There isn't the funding for them. So that's something that I think would be really critical moving forward, would be to try and figure out if we could get boat wash stations at some of these busier boat access areas, both in Lake Champlain and also on the inland lakes. We have some of the larger inland lakes with Lake Bombazine and Lake St. Catherine down in my area. So I think those would be important programs to support. I know you guys are agriculture, but I don't know where these, of course, you review all of the bills for the state. And I guess, Jeff, do you have a sense of who do we want next? Which topic?
Why don't you go to do the invest in agricultural transition, sustainability? Why don't you hit both of those? Okay, great.
So this one might be a little more of not of interest, but certainly in your wheelhouse. I work with farms. I work with over the years about 100 farms down in our area, and we certainly have seen challenges. We've seen farms go out of business, as you're well aware of. I think the Horizon Dannon no longer accepting milk from some of the farms in Vermont has been sort of the latest blow. And these farms worked hard to switch to organic so that they could make a little bit more money for their milk. And now they're having to find a new market or reconsider what they're doing. There's definitely been some great programming. I think Vermont Housing Conservation Board with their water quality grants and the dairy improvement grants, the state of Vermont with the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. There have been some wonderful programs. A farm in my area received $100,000 to build a modular meat processing unit where they can process meat locally on farm in the Medowee Valley. That's been something that is exciting, and we love to see that type of progress. We are looking at dairy farms who've been in business for generations, having to figure out how to transition out of dairy. We're looking at maybe a change in the type of farming that happens in southern Vermont. We have a lot of small farms still down here, but in conversations with Vermont Land Trust just yesterday, they were talking about how they had conserved farms, large dairy farms, but But now we're starting to see a little bit of a shift to smaller, maybe veggie, diversified, featuring agritourism or farm stand that's sort of a dynamic farm stand, and how we all as a support network, the conservation districts, the UVM extension, the state of Vermont, how we're all going to have to shift to meet these new demands along with the farmers. And so just, I think, asking for continued support for the state of Vermont, Agency of Agriculture, for the conservation districts, for the UVM extension, for the groups that help provide technical services to these farmers. I know UVM extension's been heavily involved in doing a soil health research project that hopefully will tie into some climate change funds through maybe carbon trading. Agency of Agriculture has their Pay for Phosphorus program that they're just sort of it's just gone live this year. They were looking for 60 farmers to sign up. They had 89 farmers sign up. This is amazing because the farmers have to have active nutrient management plans. The work that's gone into those plans by the farmers and the technical service providers has been huge over the years. And now these farms are ready and can be in this exciting program. So we're just asking that you continue to support these programs, the technical service providers, the farms, as they transition to something that looks probably a little bit different than what we're used to seeing with our traditional dairy economy. And I don't know if we go to ag enforcement after that.
Actually, it'll be a little out of order, but we'll save Bob for a little bit later. Why don't we go to ag enforcement, because that's, again, probably
the second piece of this request.
Most important to this committee. So we'll do that one, and then we'll quickly summarize the other points.
And I think it doesn't need to be said in this committee that, within agricultural land use, we do know that there is pollution, but it's easier to address than it is on developed lands. And so, of course, we want to maintain the farmers, even though we recognize that there is pollution coming potentially from their lands. And so with that, we transition to the enforcement piece.
Right. And so in past year versions of this particular recommendation, we've been attempting to raise the concern for lack of clarity and inconsistency in the enforcement of the water quality requirements in the agricultural sector. It's a shared responsibility between the Department of Environmental Conservation and Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, with the initial and primary responsibility essentially going to AAFM. The problem that has arisen, and I'm sure you've heard quite a bit about it, as have we, is that the regulated community, the farmers, feel that they're not getting clear or consistent, clarity may be the bigger issue, but consistent expectations, recommendations in terms of what they need to do to comply and what the consequences of a failure to comply might be. And there have been some cases of controversial public complaints about violations or perceived violations and a inconsistent or a lack of enforcement follow through, at least in terms of public perception. So in the past, what we have done is we have recommended that all of the enforcement actions be put within the Department of Environmental Conservation, not because we think DEC is the end all be all. And I led DEC, and I can tell you that we are not, or at least certainly we weren't when I was there. And I don't think that it's changed dramatically since then, but that putting it all in one place therefore clarifies who is responsible for solving the problem, and then you hold their feet to the fire. That was essentially the logic of it. The legislature, the agencies, the administrations over the years have not embraced this approach. And so this year, what we've done is taken a step back, and we're essentially raising the same concern, expressing frustration that it hasn't been dealt with. But instead of just saying, dump it all on DEC, which clearly there's no great desire to do, is to please, and this is more of a plea with the initially with the administration, the executive branch, please make this a high priority with the agency heads and hold their feet to the fire to solve this problem. Clearly, the current system can work if there is enough of a priority to clarify things, communicate properly, and get the understanding in both agencies on the same page. We feel that if the agency heads make this a priority, that will ultimately solve the problem. In the event that that does not work, then you'll see that if not, the legislature must intervene language, and that one then defaults back to put it all in one place and then just hold their feet to the fire. But there's a good deal of frustration. We've heard this from the farming community as well as others, that the current shared responsibility is not serving the regulated community, and it's not serving water quality. And something really needs to be done. So I think that kind of summarizes that. Bob, do you want to do invest in solutions, emerging contaminants?
Sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Fisher, Water Quality Superintendent for South Burlington. So once again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I feel for the farmers, they're no different than the wastewater treatment operators. They're dealing with things that, you know, they may be using atrazine and whatnot. That's what they do. They're not producing it. The same as us with PFAS or something else. It's not something we produce. It's something we deal with. One thing very quickly, I did notice, I always thought it was the 70s, but I just Googled it. Actually, the CAC was formed in 1960 and predates me even, shockingly, between Vermont, New York, and Quebec. But, you know, it's all an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, from on the farmlands, the pesticides and whatnot. I mean, these are what the farms need to, you know, to do. But are there negative impacts? Sure. It's the same, you know, what we do is public health, and they do public food production. And, you know, Vermont's kind of on fire. People are moving here. I saw something recently. They're all moving south and they're moving here. And that just drives the cost of this farmland even up. From a municipal standpoint, we are very highly in favor of building in, having condensed urban areas surrounded by farmland. That's my personal opinion. I think it's best for the environment. But 55% of Vermonters are on septic tanks. That's the most in the nation by far, by population. The average is 24%. The 55%, and I remember it was 53, 54. It's been ticking up because a lot of people are moving here. They're building big houses out in the country on septic tanks. There's more forest fragmentation, more runoff associated with that, and driving also the cost of farmland up. I've been on the CAC for at least 10 years, but Eric Clifford, from the farm representative from Addison, unfortunately is not here. He predates me on it. And, you know, I feel terrible for him when the things he tells me, I'm shocked. He's like, I guess they get checks. And he said, you know, from the government, he says, oh yeah, they put suicide prevention things in those checks because there's so many farmers that just can't make it. It's just heartbreaking. And, you know, and I always thank him because everyone blames all the water quality issues either on the wastewater, which is 3%, or the farmers. So that helps take the heat off us too. But nonetheless, you know, he's like 6th generation and his daughter lives somewhere in a very nice job. There won't be a 7th generation. So there's huge pressure on these farms as the rising land costs, all their costs are going through the roof, same as ours. And then you have to deal with all these legacy chemicals. And you never know. It's so really an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'm not an expert on the farm like atrazine or whatnot. I do know that it's been outlawed in Hawaii and some other places, and 35 countries are phasing it out. But, you know, these are issues that have to be addressed, the runoff. Certainly from a municipal standpoint, when it comes to PFAS and microplastics and other things that are coming out, well, we at South Burlington, our land, you know, our production here goes to biosolids, which is used on land for agricultural land. That's carbon sequestration. When you think of the climate action plan, you know, if suddenly we have to landfill everything, the landfill may not be able to fit it all. There'll be more off-gassing, but there'll be a huge increase in gas, greenhouse gases from all the additional trucking. There'll be a huge, increase in off-gassing from the landfill. So the 55% of Vermonters, they're land applying. That's what it's called. They're putting out microplastics. They're in their septic tanks. They're putting out PFAS in their yard. Here, in a facility is mine, I can put filtration on. It's expensive. You could put a filtration on the landfill, but once again, you've got to really we don't produce PFAS or any of these things. It has to be stopped at the source. And, these industries need to be held accountable for the costs involved, because the costs are huge. But we here can filter for it. You can't filter for that in the 55% of Vermonters that are on septic tanks. That's just going right onto their yard. Plus our phosphorus, we're here for public health is all the reason all the money was spent, but there's environmental benefits too for wastewater treatment. And example, one person on a septic tank puts as much phosphorus into their leach field as 660 people put into the river here. Now, sure, that goes into the land, but that's land application, and 10 to 15% being our failing septic systems. So there's no easy solution. My basic thing is to follow EPA's guidance, follow the science, try not to do any sort of knee-jerk reaction, because these are extremely expensive things. Say that you've banned land application, sure, okay, but you're going to lose the carbon sequestration. Plus, you're going to put a $250,000 hole in the South Burlington budget that we could spend on other things. And as you drive the cost in these core services areas up, you're going to push more people into the outskirts, and the cost of farmland is going to become, it's a lot probably cheaper for some of these farmers to raise houses than it is to raise cows. And why they're doing it still is, other than their legacy and what they do, God bless them. But they could just retire a lot of these people and get a Maserati probably with the land value they have, compared to barely eking by. So I'm sure I'm all over the road on that, but that's it for emergency contaminants. Is really an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I'm going to real quickly hit the front page, the two on the front page. Probably less of an immediate concern to this committee, but the first one, and this is sort of like the lead every single year, but this year it's a good news lead as opposed to a bad news lead, and that is the need to invest in natural and developed infrastructure. The opportunity for federal funds is a way to fill the gap between where we started with the Lake Champlain TMDL, which was, this is the bar you've got to meet. We don't know how you're going to get there, but you need a plan, and we have less idea as to how we're going to pay for it. Well, in the years since then, we've developed a plan, which is being refined, but it's being implemented. And through the legislature and also through the various administrations that have been here, a great deal of funding has been identified and applied to this. But there's still significant gaps. The priority probably still remains surface runoff from developed lands and roads and agriculture. Those two areas, if we can't meet the targets in those two areas, we're never going to meet the Lake Champlain TMDL. And those are the two areas where continued or additional funding support are going to be critical. In the case of developed lands and roads, it's a lot of infrastructure investment. Yes, there's been a substantial improvement in that regard, but the federal ARPA and some of the infrastructure money can clearly close that gap if it's intelligently dedicated for those purposes. So that's kind of the heart of that, is to make sure that we deal with the priorities that we've had for a number of years and not let those slip as new priorities come up, but to try to close the loop on that. The last one is this one, invest in public access and recreation economy. I got a few notes on that. So the main thing here is, again, looking at ARPA and federal funds to expand access, especially in my case, I'll make a special pitch for the South Lake, which is underserved And there's been substantial investment down there in cleaning out the invasive water chestnuts, and water quality improvements have been marked. And there's been quite a success story down there. But the access and the ability of people to actually use the lake or enjoy it is more limited there than elsewhere on the Vermont side. There are two fundamental reasons why this is important. First is kind of a philosophical or an emotional reason, if I can call it that, is that people value what they use and what they enjoy. And the degree to which the state can encourage and enable more people to use the lake and the waters that feed it, the higher the likelihood that, especially young people, the higher the likelihood that when they become adults, they will value or treasure that recreational opportunity. And if they value it, they're going to pay attention to it, and they're going to support efforts in the future to maintain it or to enhance it. The other reason, however, is very practical, and that is basically an economic reason. The Outdoor Business Alliance did a study that pre-pandemic, before the pandemic, the outdoor recreation sector in Vermont was growing at 15% per year, as opposed to the overall Vermont economy, which is growing at 3% per year, 5 times the rate of growth of the overall economy. Outdoor recreation represented or contributed 5.2% of Vermont's gross state product, which is the highest percentage for recreational investment, recreational economic activity in the United States, the second highest, I should say, excuse me. And that sector employs either directly or indirectly about 20,000 Vermonters. So clearly there are studies that go one way or the other in terms of one extreme or the other, but somewhere between 7 and 9 is the multiplier. So for every dollar that we invest in our recreational economy, we get $7 to $9 back in terms of economic activity that benefits all of us, the overall economy for the state. So improving access and making it easier, and perhaps even promoting the use of these waters for recreational enjoyment is both good from a standpoint of public engagement and public support, but even more immediately, it is really good for the economy. So I think that we have covered every point. And so I will turn it back over to the chairman.
Yeah, is Mark back, or
Yes.
is Mark with us?
I am. Thank you, Senator Starr. Apologies for my
there you
tardiness.
Yeah, no, that we know all about missing meetings because of Zoom. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks again for your time today. I knew you were in good hands with this group.
Yeah, they've given us a pretty full load of hay. I don't think they missed many bales. But did you have anything you'd like to add, Mark?
No, I think one thing that we've been emphasizing, of course, is as you know, there's a literal flood of funding coming into the state, once in a statehood opportunity, thanks to our congressional delegation and connected to this pandemic we've been struggling with. And that the pandemic has demonstrated just what we've known, that a thriving Lake Champlain base is vital to this economy and its people. And the challenges that the dairy industry faces require significant investment. Some transition. Our national dairy system is just failing our farmers, and it's failing the state, failing the lake as pollution continues. And emphasis, a follow-up with Hillary's comments on aquatic invasives, is that the state has just really understand the state has reduced its staffing and reduced funding to support and leverage municipal and NGO dollars, builds community and manages invasive and nuisance species. The core mantra of paying for prevention rather than paying retroactive invasives, emerging contaminants, or stormwater controls, that you get more bang for the buck by making that up. And the state just hasn't done, and I think designated funded so to the tune of about $500,000, dramatic. And
Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's very hard. You're cutting in and out, and I wonder, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. Would you be able to turn off your camera? That sometimes would help us hear all of your words. Oh,
I think he's froze now.
I've made a bad situation worse. Oh dear.
Are you with us, Mark?
I'm hearing you. Let me, I'm competing with my wife who's on a Zoom call also.
Oh,
Let me turn off my video.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm going to turn off your incoming video too, to try to improve my bandwidth. Well, so I'm not sure which parts you caught or didn't, but two key issues that we've been focusing on are the investment in the transition in agriculture to something that's sustainable, that we recognize that our agricultural systems require subsidies, and those subsidies should really be supporting farmers as they transition away from an agricultural system that isn't supporting them or the lake any longer. Dairy is challenged. Horizon and Danone's pullout of even the organic sector recently is creating more challenges. I know that the Dairy Council is presenting a report, and I think you all will be hearing that soon, I think from Mike Grady. There's just significant challenges, and with these funds, there's opportunities for us to make those strategic investments. The other is in aquatic invasives controls. The program at the DEC has been understaffed and underfunded, and in decline. And it's baffling to us on the committee that the diminution of funds would take away the leverage that municipalities and NGOs have been doing to build community, do this local work, manage nuisance species. And it just seems to be not a priority of the DEC. And they're using municipal boat registration funds, and they've been increasing, but the staffing and the funding and the proportionate share expected from NGOs and municipalities has increased over 75%. And so my read on that is about $500,000 of directed funds, whether it's general fund or other, needs to be a focused commitment to the invasive species program. With the increased utilization of boat launches and increased recreation is the continued increased risk of interbasin transfer of species and just their continued spread and growth. Here, it's just that much more expensive to try to manage them. So those are sort of two key issues that I'd like to highlight. Beyond what Jeff talked about with the alignment between investing in stormwater controls, both in ag lands and in undeveloped lands that are aligned with the Climate Action Plan, and there's lots of opportunities to hit our projected numbers for the TMDL, for the climate plan, et cetera, with a commitment of funding and priority to those sectors.
Well, thank you, Mark. And we'll go to questions. We all serve on 2 committees in the Senate. And I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and I must tell you, certainly EPA, the Department of Environmental Conservation, their budgets haven't gone down. So they must be moving people internally from looking after our aquatic nuisance issues to something else. And I don't know if you folks have been before and they were in last week in approach. So, but I can hit them up with this question when the different departments show up, because it was Julie Moore and the head honchos that were in looking for more money this past week. So that issue we can deal with, I think, but I don't know if you've talked with Natural Resources, but they ought to get on to that as well. Our Natural Resources Committee. Are there questions from members? Brian, Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't think I've kept it a secret how much I value and appreciate the work of the conservation districts. I really do. To me, they represent one of the best investments we could make on this front and a lot of different fronts because of their relationships with the farming community. They're welcomed onto the farms in most cases, and that's a critical piece of it. But I didn't know, I'm looking at the invasive species piece of this. Is there a difference between trying to solve that problem in the summer versus the winter? In other words, are there any times, I realize that with boat inspections and that sort of thing, you're talking only, I mean, nobody's out on the lake in the middle of winter. But are there different things that we could be doing to control that situation? So that's my first question. And this one always comes up too, that even if Vermont did the best job they could possibly do, we're at the mercy of New York State and Canada in many ways in terms of mitigating the pollution of certainly Lake Champlain. So I didn't know whether folks felt we were ahead of the other 2 entities, or are they doing their part, I guess, sort of to help us out? So that question is for anybody that wants to grab it.
Hi, it's Mark Nutt again. Thanks, Senator Collmore. I'll address the multi-jurisdictional challenges, I guess, and then maybe Hillary can speak to the invasives question. Although I can touch base on that too, related to New York. Quickly, New York has mandatory boat inspections. Lake George is one of the strongest boat inspection lake and their lake association, and they've proven that it's very effective. There's been some reluctancy with Fish and Wildlife in citing the boat inspection stations at heavily used places. They finally convinced Fish and Wildlife to get that set up at the Colchester launch site, which is the most used. Up here in South Hero at the Guillemette one, with the Basin Program support, they intercepted hydrilla, which is a significant invasive species of concern. And as far as the Quebec and New York, just the amount of load coming from Vermont vastly exceeds loads that are coming from Quebec or New York. New York is addressing, they aren't a participant in the TMDL. They have their own, they are addressing theirs. I know through the Basin Program, some significant funds are flowing to support municipal infrastructure, wastewater treatment plants and the like. But the loads are just dramatically, I would guess, and Jeff or someone might know better, but I think that Vermont contributes 60+% of the load into the lake. And so it's really dramatically falls on our developed lands and our agricultural lands. To the extent there's significant shared load up in Missisquoi between Quebec and Vermont, it's the Rock River and the Missisquoi River. There's a very strong stakeholder effort between Vermont, United States, and Quebec to try to solve for that problem. There's a recent basin program joint task force that was just developed, focusing exclusively on that. And there's been some pretty interesting agricultural innovations in Quebec, and they have a little more flexibility in managing in a way that I don't think we can here in the state of Vermont. And again, New York, you know, the agricultural impact is primarily in the south part of the lake, and there's really good working relationships. You know, Hillary and her counterparts in New York across the lake that work together with shared equipment and shared resources. So I don't know if any Jeff or Hillary add anything to that.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, Mark, sometimes you live up north, I believe, right, Mark?
I do. South Hero.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, or sometimes, we'll have farmers in from Franklin County. And of course, they have to have 30 and 50-foot buffer zones, you know, at the side of their fields. And they'll bring up the fact that across the lake from them, and I don't know if you've been over there, but down through, if you're going to Cumberland Point and take the Lake Road, and all along Route 9, going south out of Champlain, you see cornfields there, you know, hundreds of acres that are planted right to the ditch and right to the lake, down through by Giro's egg farm. And, you know, they'll bring that up and say, well, how come New York isn't keeping up with Vermont's rules? And, you know, that's been a thorn that they've had in their side for quite some time. But other questions from I don't know if you have any answer to that, Mark, or not.
I don't. I've seen that, and I've seen the same in Quebec, where they're planted right up to the edge of the ditch as I go back and forth across the border. And you know, there's other places I see really, really sound buffers. I'm not sure what the inconsistency is there. And we certainly have advocated within the basin program, where all three jurisdictions get together, that there's better consistency and better shared practices to reduce the impact in the lake. Other than that, I don't really know the specific different regulations.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Pearson.
Just sticking with the theme here, because we hear this a lot in the legislature. It's sort of human nature to wish that our problem could be, you know, more broadly shared, let's say, with other actors. But in addition to just the load, it strikes me that part of it is the topography. I mean, certainly in the central part of the lake, if you go over to the New York side, you're looking at a huge cliff face, and whereas on the Vermont side, it's a lawn that slopes in, and in fact, of course, a great chunk of the lake on our side is no more than 4, 5, 6 feet deep, and so you see and so I guess I want to verify my assumption that it is, as much as anything, the topography is something we have to recognize, no fault of anybody's, but that's part of it. Because you go across to New York and there's farms everywhere, and you think, well, must be the same dynamic. But am I right that that's part of what we're looking at? And it's, I only again would offer, it's important for us to internalize that actually, we got to look in the mirror here for great majority of these issues, unfortunately, and certainly hold others accountable for their portion of it, but the bulk of it rests on our shoulders.
Senator Pearson, I think you're absolutely right. You know, Lake Champlain, compared to other basins, has a dramatically larger basin land area to surface area ratio. So that just means what happens on the land has a stronger impact, multiplier effect, than what happens into the water body. And certainly our relative developed, whether it's developed agricultural lands or developed municipal and urban or suburban lands, are dramatically more on our side of the lake and our scale of the basin than it is across the lake. And then there's also predominant differences in soil and geological characteristics, as you identified. We have much more of the lake floodplain, clay plain basin qualities than rocky forested hard rock slopes. And so our relative impacts for those soils and et cetera they're just more. And so again, it is ultimately the majority of the issues are caused by our engagement with our landscape here in Vermont than in New York. They could do more to limit. They do some things much more aggressively than we do. The inspection stations around Lake George and along 87, they're mandatory boat inspection along the Adirondack Northway. Every boat has to pull over. We've advocated for that here on 89. It's as much education and outreach and awareness as it is intercepting invasives from folks that don't clean their boats off or clean their boats out before they move from one fishing spot or recreation body to another. So you're right about the geography and the basin characteristics.
So our boat launches or inspections should move to 22A and 89 and Route 7 and periodically set those up and check that. So yeah,
we've advocated for something like that for a while.
Yeah, Senator Polina, I believe, had a question.
Yeah, it's about invasive, excuse me, it also relates to invasive species and sort of a bang for the buck kind of question. Earlier on, it was mentioned that there was a need for certain washing stations that were not yet online. And I'm wondering, when we talk about a washing station, which could be really useful and helpful, what kind of investment are we talking about making? It doesn't seem like it should be that hard for us to move ahead on these kinds of things. I'm just curious. Well, you already talked about the decline in support from DEC, but I'm just wondering what the washing station, what it would mean to set up a few more washing stations in needed areas.
Well, my information is from the Basin Program Lake Steward wash stations that I'm aware of, and essentially they are a short shipping container, one of the 20-foot length ones, and inside they have a machine that is a tank, a pressure washer, and some of them are heated so that they reach a temperature of 140 degrees, which can kill any veligers, any of the potential invasives will kill them. I understand they range between $15,000 and $25,000 per unit. One of the additional costs, and I know it's a really successful component that's expanded in the Basin Program, and I understand from the DEC Lakes and Ponds that their greeter program, which is similar, are the people there that engage the folks taking their boats in and out, develop awareness, education, and sort of appease folks' perceptions that this is a big hassle. You're in my way, you're slowing me down. And that's some of the feedback. And it's a way for people to communicate that say, hey, look, this is really important because an ounce of prevention now in a little bit of time to be sure you're not dragging something from Lake Ontario or Lake Bomazine or somewhere into a lake or water body that doesn't have invasives is really meaningful, and it's a lot of cost avoided. And so to me, it's not a lot of money for the unit, it's the staffing. And they continue to expand it, but managing those staff, and as I understood it, at least at the DEC level, it was, managing this army of temps. And there's a lot of costs in training and supporting temporary positions to come in and fill those roles. And, you all are keenly aware of workforce and staffing challenges. And so hiring and supporting those staff people on a part-time seasonal basis has always been a challenge. And it seems that the Basin program has had a little more success than the state has, perhaps. But my sense is there's about a $500,000 allocation that would go a long way in supporting and preventing the spread of invasives and nuisance species at the Vermont level, so that they are then supporting and leveraging funds, whether it's from the Basin program, municipalities, or conservation districts, or Lake Champlain Committee and other non-governmentals that gather the people to actually do that volunteer work.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask Hillary, is she still with us?
Yes, I apologize. I'm having some internet issues, which normally VTEL's done a very good job by me, but this meeting's been a challenge. So go ahead. Hopefully I can hear you.
Well, I'm wondering if the conservation districts have set up their visiting day to the State House or their Zoom time to the State House yet. And if they do have,
Okay.
Pardon?
Sorry, I just heard, had we set up a visiting day to the State House and then you cut out? Is that the?
Yeah, usually they come by on an annual basis, but of course with the pandemic, it's been all messed up. So I was wondering if you folks were going to be coming to or Zoom into a meeting with legislators this year.
It's interesting because we have a request in for the first time, I think, ever or in a long time to the legislature, a funding request. And so our visits might be a little different this year. I know a number of people testified on behalf of the legislature last week at the budget hearings. So you might be folks might be reaching out one-on-one this year. I'm not entirely sure that we're going to have a conservation district day this year. I hadn't heard that it was going to be more one-on-one outreach this year.
Well, what I'm getting at is the hearing we had last week, there's 50, 60 people there, and I think we had maybe 5 or 6 people talk about the conservation districts needing a few $1 million, and that would be a lot easier for the process, the way it works. If we had some of you district coordinators testify before our ag committee, then we could take that information and send a letter down to appropriations, which would really give you a lot better chance of getting money than just from testifying at that big hearing we had. So, if a few of you district coordinators, if you could get hold of Sarah Danshell up in our district and a couple of others and set a meeting up with Linda to come before our committee that would really in depth lay out what you're going to use this money for and why you need it, then we as a committee could move that to appropriations, and it would make a big difference, I think, on your behalf.
That sounds great. I did not catch every word of that, but I will watch the recording to see what you just said.
Yeah, broadband's really great. Well, and check with, do you know Sarah
I
Danshell?
think a lot
up
of
in
pressure
Orland?
during COVID.
Yeah, talk with her because I kind of gave her the same info yesterday but anyways,
Okay.
are there any other questions from committee members?
Thank you,
or-
Senator Starr.
Do any of our guests have anything else they would like to offer? If not, thank you all for your time this morning. We'll pick through your testimony and try to help on some of these issues as we move forward. But if you get a chance to talk with DEC, tell them you heard their budget hadn't gone down anywhere. Your people gone that usually work on invasive things.
Thank
That
you.
meeting is scheduled.
Yes.
Oh,
Right.
it is? Oh, good.
We'll
Yeah.
see them tomorrow, I believe.
Yes.
Senator Starr, thanks
Yeah.
again, and thank you all for your work. I know that it's harder and you're deluged with more information electronically with these hybrid legislative sessions, but we appreciate it and appreciate your consideration of the action plan and the opportunities in front of us with this once in a statehood flood of funding to transform Vermont. So thanks again.
Yeah, and thank you. Your work's very important to all of us. So thanks, and we'll
Thank you.
excuse you and move on.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good
Thank
morning.
you
I
very
guess.
Good
much.
afternoon.
All right, we should have talked a little bit about, we've talked about how ag and DEC or that crew, keep sending out mixed messages and don't get along. Hell, you'd think that, you'd think that they would be able to get that sort of straight. They're professional people, and I guess, I don't know if their turf is trying just to protect their turf or what, but I think we have Michael with us, and we were gonna talk some in regards to the task force stuff. And Michael, did I see you sent that information in changing the date of the task force and in that, was there other issues you wanted to talk with us in regards to?
Well, why don't we just walk through the report and see the executive summary and see what's already been done.
Yeah.
And what's in the pipeline, what probably won't get done this year, and what you may want to do further.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm gonna put up the executives.
Okay. I won't bother to
Okay.
get mine out then.
I'll put up the executive summary for the report.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So this is just the executive summary from the report submitted in January from the task force. So the first recommendation was state payment of farmer premiums for participation in risk management. That is in the budget adjustment, and it was paid for with ARPA funds as recommended. So that's done. And from the General Assembly's point of view, the governor would still need to sign the act and the agency still needs to administer the program, but you've done what you can do.
Yep.
And they increased farmer participation. You wanted to basically collect information on that and encourage the agency to have farmers participate in risk management. I think your first action, the creation of that program, is going to create the incentive for farmers to participate. I've already received emails myself from farmers and from people representing farmers who are very interested in the program. The advocacy for the Farm Bill, that's really something that's going to lie with the Agency of Ag, the congressional delegation, and to an extent, the Vermont Milk Commission. I don't know what extent you've talked to the congressional delegation about advocacy for the extension of these programs, but that might be something that could be done formally or informally.
Well, see, the Farm Bill changes after next year, I believe, right,
Right,
Michael?
right. Yeah, 2023.
But it seems like they're already doing some things. I've heard they're doing some things getting ready for that. Have you heard anything along those lines?
I have. I think that the USDA, well, traditionally USDA kind of sets up kind of a framework bill that then Congress and the relevant agricultural aid committees kind of work off as a framework. I think they're in that process right now.
Yeah, so we need to pay attention, and if we could get some of this info to that crew, I don't know if we have to do it through our federal delegation, but if we don't push that, it may not happen.
Okay. Well, I'm meeting with Will Stevens, Tom Berry, and Rebecca Ellis tomorrow afternoon regarding the issue with slaughter and the personal use exemption. I'll just bring up the committee's interest in certain provisions in the Farm Bill, and most specifically extension of the risk management programs.
Yeah, because I don't know if the committee, did you folks get a call from Will Stevens this weekend in
No.
regards? Well, I was wanting to talk with the committee in regards to that issue, that it's a bill down in natural resources. And anything, any water you use over 5,000 gallons, you have to do a report on it. And
Oh, I did see that. Yes, Bobby, I did get that. It was fairly long.
Yeah, I mean, and then I got 2 or 3 other letters from other veggie growers, and they said it's crazy trying to do this. And so we're gonna have to talk with Chris over Natural Resources, or get the bill sent to us so we can deal with that issue, I think, once we get the load in. But sorry to interrupt you, Michael.
No, no problem. Should I continue?
Since we're in a little pause here, just going back to the dairy assistance, the bill is going to, the VAA is going to conference committee, I think. Do I have that right? And Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, have you been able to touch base with Chair Partridge and see if, I guess I'm just wondering the status. It's.
I think I'm meeting with them today at 1 o'clock. Linda, are you on? Well, maybe.
Yes, I'm on.
Yeah.
You're meeting at 3 o'clock with them.
Oh, 3, okay. That, yeah, 3 o'clock, when we have a little break and approach, I'm supposed to meet with Carolyn.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions before we ask Michael to move on?
Nope.
Okay, Michael.
Okay. So I think the next major issue would be the Fmmo reform, which is also something that could be addressed in the Farm Bill or underneath the traditional milk market order amendment process. But that's an advocacy issue for the congressional delegation, the agency, and the Milk Commission as well. The next was the state regulatory milk market order pricing program. And what you had recommended here was obtaining an academic legal opinion regarding the legal questions, specifically Commerce Clause and otherwise. You have done that. Dan Smith, the co-chair of the task force, is working with a professor, a Commerce Clause expert, on developing that opinion. So that should be submitted to you relatively soon. The raw milk use tax, there hasn't been much movement, if any, that I have seen on that issue, or that recommendation. Similar with the fee on, well, actually, the legal opinion that under number 3 will also touch on number 4. So you can basically combine 3 and 4 under that legal opinion. 5, the fee on the retail sale of packaged milk products for advertising funding. That's the one that really hasn't seen any interest at all, any movement.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about that. And what this deal is put a certain percentage of a point on the retail sale of milk to enhance advertising and promote the usage of milk, within the state. But we haven't really taken any testimony on that, and of course, milk prices fluctuate big time anyhow from one store to another. So, that's something I guess we need to chat about as a committee, if we wanted to do something along those lines.
Bobby, would that 5 to 10 cent fee be on per pound, or how is that going to be done?
I thought that was on like a gallon, right, Michael?
Yes. It's on the packaged fluid milk.
Okay.
On, to push as it goes through the store.
Yep.
Right. Milk is, some families look at that as a necessity product, but we heard during our summer meetings that something like that should be implemented to try to push up. What is it? We have 500,000 pounds of milk too much in Vermont, Michael.
Right,
And
approximately.
Try to push that into fluid sales if we could get more people to drinking. And I think the big thing on getting more people to drink the milk is to get away from that watered down 1% stuff and get more solids in the milk so it tasted, like whole milk. People would probably buy it more often.
Yep.
Especially school kids. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Well,
Okay.
could I just say, it seems a little strange to me to think that putting a little charge on everybody's purchase of milk would generate enough money to have an advertising campaign that has Vermont reversing national trends. So, I mean, if we want to dig into it, I'm open to that, but I'll just start by expressing some skepticism. Since their price point impact and we're making it more expensive in order to try to generate more sales, this seems a little counterintuitive to me.
Michael, we did get a price on that. Wasn't that a couple $100,000 or something?
Yeah, I think that was the general.
187 or
something like that. I have to find the full report.
But that wouldn't be used. That wouldn't be used nationwide, Chris. That if we did that.
No, right. It would be locally, but it's not going to be. It's either not going to be. My point was that there's a national trend of, consuming less fluid dairy, and the concept here is a small ad campaign to try to, effectively reverse that. So either it's a significant ad campaign, which means we've charged everybody more when they're buying milk already, the people that are buying it, or we won't raise much in order to really reverse the trend. That's my kind of point anyway, it's not, I'm glad creative thinking is going into it. I hold back a little bit, but it just strikes me as a little bit wishful thinking in terms of being effective.
Well, it certainly is gone. I mean, we spent quite a little bit of time at the task force level, and I think it's something. Yeah, it would take quite a lot more discussion. So infrastructure support.
Sure. So this is an issue or a recommendation that's moving as well. In that the agency housekeeping bill, they are recommending changes to the capital assistance program and to the farm agronomic assistance program that would open up eligibility, make it a little bit more flexible in what can receive assistance, including programs that for climate change and climate resiliency. So I would say that this recommendation is on its way, and you'll probably see it in the ag housekeeping bill after crossover.
Yeah. Oh, so the House is working on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Honestly, now that I think about it, this is in your these are in your sections of the ag housekeeping. These are in the sections that you asked to be put into Senator Polina's and Senator Pearson's RAP bill. So this is already something that you're working on.
Yeah.
I misspoke. Okay. The funding of grant writers or an ombuds person to help farmers and ag businesses access the use of federal funds, similar to the READY program that your committee initiated a few years ago. That I have not I've not seen any discussion of that.
No, we haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay. Transportation, similarly with hauling costs and highway weights, I'm unaware of any discussion of changing or shifting hauling cost or changing highway weights for conformity with neighboring states. I've not heard anything on that at all.
And that's a big issue, and we can already get permitted up to 100,000 pounds on Vermont roads. I don't know, we could check that out, but with our overweight permits that you can receive with a third axle, puts us up around 100,000 pounds, which is probably about as heavy as most of that equipment is built to handle. But
Okay.
labor.
I know that the Commerce Committee in the House took testimony on the report and looked at these recommendations. Similarly, I know that there's a lot of discussion about housing and workforce bonuses. I don't really know whether or not any of those discussions have focused specifically on dairy or the dairy economy. But I think in the broader context that these discussions are ongoing.
The only thing on that is Gus over at VHCB, they have agreed to set aside up to, I believe it's $10 million to remodel, update, and even if they have to change out some farm labor housing. And that program, we had the guy in from UVM, I think not too long ago, the extension person maybe. And then we've gotten correspondence from Buster in regards to that. But that's all, they're working through the process. What we hear, 2/3 of the farm labor housing is good. It's about 1/3 of it that really needs quite a lot of updating and fixing. So that one is kind of moving along, Michael.
Okay. So the apprenticeship programs or creating an apprenticeship program or providing financing for apprenticeship programs to attract younger people to farming and help potentially with farm succession. I haven't heard much discussion of that at all.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
We haven't done much on that one.
Okay. Purchasing and with state agencies and schools, I do think you've had some discussion about this, but maybe not as much as you had last year with the school meals bill. But that remains something that's outstanding.
Yeah, have we received any numbers from them? Only that on that one account, Rosie was running short, but then they found that, there was a little error and we're going to end up fine. But if we wanted to work on that for the 23 budget, we really need to get going on that. Have you guys given that any thought?
Are you
Can't say
talking
I
to?
have.
Okay.
To the committee?
I'm sorry, Bobby, I got distracted. What was your question?
Well, on the school lunch programs and any of that, if we're going to do something like we did last year to push that along and get it extended in money, we didn't appropriate enough for 2 years, so we've got to get that rolling, to get it ready for the 23 budget.
You're talking about the local incentive?
Yes, to help, well, anything doing with purchasing of Vermont milk and Vermont products and promoting that.
Yeah, as I understand, it's part of the governor's recommendation. So, at this point, we're waiting to see if the House pulls that through. I believe that's the testimony we've heard. Because recall, I was going to try to push this into our package around the dairy assistance money, but a day later we found out that it was part of the recommend.
So has the House done anything that you know of, Michael?
Not that I know of.
And well, we better mark that one and stay on top of that issue. And so processing capacity.
Right. I haven't heard much on this either, of finding processing capacity additional, whether or not it's an additional plant or finding unused capacity in the state to as a way to incent additional production and processing. I haven't heard anything on that either.
See, that might fall into line with the outcome of the Horizon situation. If there's additional capacity to handle that extra organic milk, and as I look at that, the big issue on that is to help like Monument Farms or Booth Brothers in Barry to be able to handle and bottle that extra, to help them finance if they have to expand and add on to a plant or something. It's very expensive, and if that gets worked out, so Organic Valley picks that extra milk up and needs some money for expansion in a plant, that Vermont would be able to use some of this federal money to help do that expansion. And that, I think that's something that we probably need to chat with the ag agency and with Stony Fields, who's saying they'll pick some of those farmers up, or most of them. So I think that's where we'd have to go on that particular issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just say I hope we will look at that. And it's sort of a related issue, Mr. Chair, and I don't know where we start, but when the announcement about Horizon came down, one of the things that I heard that piqued my interest was that one of the reasons they were not interested in maintaining Vermont producers was that our certification of organic standards is strict. And the accusation or assertion is that elsewhere that's not the case. And so it's cheaper to produce milk and have it be certified organic elsewhere, which does two things: hurts our farmers, obviously, in the very short term, but also weakens the organic standard more broadly, if that's true. And, it's out of our jurisdiction, but I wonder if it's at least worth trying to poke around a little bit and see if it would be another thing to push our federal partners on. Because if that's true, that just bodes poorly for our organic markets generally, and there are still many farmers that are well supported. Perhaps our best supported dairy farmers are a part of the organic market that still exists. So seems kind of important to me. I have no real sense of how we figure that out, but it is related to my mind.
Well, of course, I heard that pretty direct, and Michael did also, that some of the western states, somehow they got a couple of changes made in the farm bill. Do you recall that, Michael?
Yeah, they're under the organic standards, there's a provision that allows for transition of livestock that don't meet the standards into the program, and depending on how you view it, some people view it as a one-time, when you are transitioning, but as it's being used on certain farms in certain states, it's kind of an ongoing transition of so it reduces the cost of bringing livestock onto the farm. Theoretically, doesn't meet the organic standard, and gives a greater cost competition advantage to those farms.
Yeah.
So that's that kind of organic loophole is really, and there has been, Leahy wrote an article or a letter
to the secretary,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. To require greater enforcement of the actual intent and requirements of the transition provisions.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear you explored it a little bit. Without being too burdensome, Michael, would you, when you're meeting with the federal staff tomorrow, you said, would you just find out if there's been any response, or alert them that we're interested in being kept in the loop there?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Should I move on?
Yep.
The next is the business assistance and succession planning, and basically providing additional funds for that for farmers. VHCB does some of this already, but I haven't heard any discussion of additional funds to them for this specifically.
Yeah, we may want to not set it aside, but put a note with that to have Gus in or Jen from VHCB and see if they could get us some kind of projected costs for that and what they're doing is going.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too, Mr. Chair. I thought we'd already provided VHCB with some additional funding. It may not be earmarked this way, and then doesn't the UVM Extension Service offer some sort of help here too?
They work, I don't know, I think VHCB contracts with the extension service to do some of that kind of work through the
Yep.
farm viability program.
Right.
So that's what we would have to get them in on to see how much of their program is set up for, because once you go through the viability program and say it's not viable to the particular farmer, then they have to transition into either to a new owner or to a different type of farming operation. We could maybe get them in and do a full
Yep,
a full review of that.
that'd be good.
Should I move
Okay,
on?
Michael? Yeah,
Okay. So the last recommendation is extension of the task force authority. The task force as it exists now is scheduled to cease to exist on March 1, 2022. The report from the Dairy Task Force recommended extending it until February 1, 2023. If the current authority expires prior to any action to extend it, I can probably work retroactively to extend the task force going into the future.
do we have to do that statutorily, or is that something you can get extended through the President Pro Tem and the Speaker?
Well, it depends on if you want money. And if you want money for members or if you want to seek money for further academic or other services, I think you'd probably want that task force to be statutorily extended.
I wonder, but the only bill we've got moving right now is the one that's down in finance, right?
Yep.
The S-188, yes.
Yeah. I mean, they really, the two bills aren't anything that's germane one to the other.
Yeah, but you'll likely see the housekeeping bill in a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks. And
So we've got a vehicle coming.
right, and you can put this on that, and I can draft language to say that the Dairy Task Force, as it existed under the act that created it, is authorized to continue operation until February 1, 2023, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, notwithstanding the cease to exist on March 1, the task force is authorized to continue to operate under its authority until February 1, 2023.
Yeah. So
Is
we've
most
got
of the
that.
cost of that just per diems for the members, or is there a sort of large?
Well, the last large cost was the contracting for the law professor to do the legal opinion. That was probably the biggest cost so far.
Yeah. We haven't gotten that bill, but it's somewhere between 5 and 10 grand for that. But
Right.
some of those, pardon?
That's correct. That's a correct estimate.
Okay.
Yeah, but some of those deals where some committees have had to hire professionals to run 5 times, 10 times that. So, we've got to. Oh, well, of course, we haven't got the end result yet, but I think we got a pretty good deal there, don't you, Michael? Or do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I think that it was very cost effective contract. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Good answer.
So that wraps it up, Michael.
That's the last of the recommendations from the task force. Should I stop sharing?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Oh, we
Corey's
got a
getting
new
fed.
member. Yeah.
You know, I'm home with a sick
Um,
baby today, so she's got a good cough.
Oh.
Gotta juggle and do it
Certainly
all.
looks good. I'm glad she looks like her mother.
Me too.
So committee, will Michael, maybe those the high points of your presentation, the things that we actually talked about, you could pull out and get on one separate item, so one separate sheet, so we some of those things, you know, we just aren't going to be able to work on. But the ones that were mentioned that we could work on and maybe you'll have time to work on, could we pull those off the master copy and shorten that list up?
Sure.
Yeah.
So what the extension is obviously one thing that you would want to work on. You also talked about getting Jen or Jen Holler or Gus Seeligan on the succession planning.
Yep.
You wanted to talk to the agency about capacity. What other recommendations? You wanted to talk to the congressional delegation and the agency about Farm Bill and Fmmo.
Yeah, and the organic stuff, make sure they're pushing on that.
Okay. So what else would you want to come off the list?
You
Should have been
guys,
taking notes. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't remember all of them.
Definitely want to keep an eye on the school, the local food
yeah,
incentive.
the school
Yep.
meals. Was there anything on the pushing the milk, the low fat milk to 2% with the federal crew that we'd want to talk to them about? Because that's in the federal domain, and they're the ones that pay for that. Maybe we could put that with the federal delegation stuff.
Yep.
The weight thing on the roads, and paying for the pickup, they really, when we had those hearings, every milk company were complaining about the cost of picking milk up and what they've done to alleviate. And, you know, they even commingle milk from company to company to cut down on the cost, but it's still, and the farmer pays that whole bill.
Yep.
The shipping cost, and that's always kind of bothered me a little bit. You know, if they pick the milk up at the farm and they go down the road 1/10 of a mile and tip that milk truck over, you know, it isn't the farmer's insurance that pays for that, it's the hauler's insurance that pays for that. And how they get away charging the farmer for all the hauling when they have no control over the hauling. But But that's a long drawn out discussion to try to resolve any of that. So is there anything else that we talked about that we should get on the short list?
I don't think so.
No? So I guess, Michael, we're all set then.
Okay. So for some of those things that you want to brought off the list, I don't really have legislative language for any of them. For example, the increased purchasing. That was more of a recommendation for the relevant legislative committees to engage schools and state agencies and why they're not purchasing more and what they need to purchase more. So I'm not sure I can put it on a list, but I don't know what to do with it with regard to legislative language.
Well, I don't think we've reached any resolve on that to for you to, I would, if you shouldn't have to do that until we get more into it, I think, Michael.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to be
Yeah.
clear what the expectation would be.
And any of those other issues that we need to still do more research on and stuff like that, don't worry about it. But I just didn't want to lose track of the
Sure.
issues that we might be able to get to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm just trying to
Yeah.
be above board.
We have discussed it in as much as we've talked about how our local food and purchase incentives has a percentage, and it's a relatively low percentage because it excludes milk. And the agency has said to us, if you include milk, you're going to shoot the percentage up. So there seems to be a bit of a disconnect because the agency's kind of telling us they are purchasing Vermont milk. And we know, of course, that it's sort of Vermont milk, it probably comes from cows in Vermont, but it may be bottled in Massachusetts and blah, 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 blah. So,
Yeah.
right. I mean, it's just coming back to me that getting to the bottom of this is more than a couple of days of testimony.
Well, the whole damn dairy thing is like that. I mean, it's a rough nut to crack, I'll tell you. I mean, they keep stuff from you or something. But I mean, why wouldn't we have a bottler in Vermont bottling bottling school lunch milk or college
Right.
milk or prison milk or any of that stuff? I mean, it should be being, manufactured. It's produced here. It should be manufactured and packaged here.
Even if it was just those customers, it's a lot of customers.
Maybe
Yeah.
we should have the state put out a request for proposals, say that they want somebody to bottle milk for schools and see whether it generates interest amongst some potential, either a group of farmers could come together and bottle, or one of the existing companies could decide to bottle for schools. Put out some kind of request for proposals or something like that, see if there's any interest in it.
Maybe that would
We're
allow
looking
us
to
to
build
get
one
a-
in Franklin County.
Sure.
Pardon?
No, the Abbey Group slip. That's that other project.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, right. We heard about that. Yep.
So we might
I-
have a company in the near future who could do that.
Yep.
Right
Maybe-
there, the Abbey Group.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe that would
Yeah.
allow us to get some federal waiver that would let any milk produce and bottle exclusively in state can be more than skim milk for kiddos.
I would be 100% supportive of that.
well, I think, that should be aired out because that I don't know if any of you ever drank skim milk, but it's awful stuff. It's like drinking cock.
And a lot of kids, you want them to get whole milk. I know there's a balance, but my 3-year-old's still only 31 pounds, so we still stick the whole milk to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're probably not feeding a poor old guy.
Oh no, he just runs around. His little sister's gonna outgrow him pretty soon.
He'll grow quick. Don't worry. Anything else, guys?
Nope.
No. Well, we've got caucus in a few minutes. We've got some work to do with natural resources on that previous meeting and talking with those guys. I don't know if it'll all fall on deaf ears, but I don't know if we could have someday a joint meeting with them to discuss some of that stuff. The boat washing, why the heck haven't they taken care of that? And there's all kinds of that around. And
I would just say, Rogers and I used to be on natural resources together, and we did a lot of work. It was the last invasive update in a sense, and the NOAA or whoever it was today was dead on. It's staff. It's not the capital outlay. It's the ongoing management. And, I think absolutely we're foolish not to make those investments, or at least push, but that is the reason.
It's just, but they come in and you ought to see the money. They've got 700-800 people that work there. Their workforce certainly isn't going down, and their wants and asks aren't going down. So the money's going somewhere. So maybe FPL could help us, because no doubt they're getting more user fees somehow with all the boom in outdoor rec. Yeah. I was really happy to hear that deal about the 15% increase a year.
Michael, you can take care of that with Snyder, right? Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and then we got that water issue with that Will Stevens brought up. So
Yep.
Did you get anything on that, Michael?
Well, I drafted that though. So
what about the 5,000 gallons deal?
right. So there's a requirement. It's basically kind of tracking with the groundwater withdrawal program that went into effect about 10 years ago, where to get a idea of how much water is withdrawn from state surface waters, that people who are reporting or withdrawing above a certain amount have to start reporting. And then the agency establishes a permitting program, with a yet to be determined gallonage threshold for a permit. I didn't think it was going to have much effect on agriculture, because from what I understand, a lot of farms use wells instead of surface water diversion, because wells, agriculture is exempt from the groundwater withdrawal requirements from wells. So if they have an issue, I just assumed farms were using wells and or would transition to wells to avoid any issue with this law.
Well, farms can't be exempt from the other part of that don't have wells.
No, they could.
Yeah.
The issue is that Vermont is one of the few states in the country that doesn't have a permitting program for surface water withdrawals. They implement requirements through the state water quality standards and a procedure for ensuring that a use of the water doesn't drop below certain low flow standards that would affect aquatic biota and basically use of the water. But it's not as transparent as a program as some would like it to be, and it doesn't have the kind of structure of a permit program. So there was a study committee that went into effect 2 years ago with the recommendation to come up with a recommendation on how to regulate surface water diversion. And that's what led to this bill.
Well, anyways, we got to run, but Will Stevens and
I'm sure some farms are probably will specifically that are using water diversion are concerned.
Yeah, I got an
But-
email. I got a long email from, I think it was from Will, but it had quotes from a whole bunch of different farmers, like who were complaining about the threshold.
well, and the worst part is none of them were notified to testify. So that's, but anyways, we'll deal with that. We've got to run.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, are you there, Chris?
He just left.
Well, I guess he's already